What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be checking out the Transformers Knight Rider Agent Knight, the ultimate crossover for both kids and fans of the 80s, as they have taken the Pontiac Trans Am, combined that with the power of the Allspark to give KITT the ability to transform. And when it does come down to design, this appears to be incredibly close to how this guy did originally appear in the TV show. The only part that I think I would change would be when it comes down here to this back license plate. Personally, I think this could have looked even better had instead they decided to swap this out for the more iconic Knight. But one thing which I most definitely do really like is the amount of clear plastic inserts used, especially when it comes down to these side doors. And as we spin around here to the front, which is by far the best part of the vehicle, in addition to sporting those wicked retractable headlights, this guy's packing the iconic light bar, which leads me on to easily this guy's biggest gimmick. This is in fact the very first crossover ever to have electronic lights and sounds integrated into his design. In total, this guy does require 3 AG13 batteries, which are unfortunately not included, but not even that is enough to defer from the fact that this is an absolute banging vehicle mode, and as you would expect, all 4 wheels are indeed pinned on, so when it does come down to Agent Knight turbo boosting through that battlefield, he should have no issues in doing so. Flying through some comparisons, first of all, we are bringing out the Studio Series 86 Optimus Prime. Now, I can definitely see this part of the video maybe being a little off-putting, because when it does come down to scale, unfortunately these two don't really size up all that well at all. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe any of these crossovers have ever specifically been intended to scale with the main line, or for that matter, alongside each other. Although, I would be straight up lying if I said that at the very least I wasn't expecting him to pair pretty alright alongside the Masterpiece line, because here we have the MP Blue Streak, and that Trans Am is just way too big in comparison to a classic Datsun. Flying through some of the more recent ones, here we have Party Wallop, aka the awesome TMNT Party Wagon, and yet again guys, the sizing here is definitely completely off. And even more so as we bring out the Back to the Future Gigawatt. One thing which I definitely noticed was how many of these guys are directly inspired by both movies and TV shows that were originally released during the 80s, which I think I can definitely say were the golden days, because now, almost 40 years on, they are still absolute bangers. And then finally, the Studio Series 86 Deluxe Class Bumblebee. Transformation time for Agent Knight. Despite packing a fairly impressive size, I was surprised to see that, to be honest, he is no more complex than that of a standard deluxe class. So for the first step, we are going to grab a hold of this piece and pop it all the way through to the underside. We are then going to flip this guy here upside down, where this tab should very nicely snap into that slot, exactly like that. Then for the next step, we are going to grab a hold of the forearms and detach these here from beneath the vehicle. We are then going to make use out of the shoulder joint and slide this here outwards. You are then going to want to spin around here at the bicep joint, and again guys, make sure to do exactly the same here for the opposite side. So swing out at that shoulder, spin around here at that bicep joint. Then for the next step, we are going to grab a hold of these side doors and begin to angle these here outwards as well. Then what you're going to do is spin down here to the base of the figure, where we are now going to grab a hold of what will become the shin guards for the robot mode, and also pop these baddies here out on both sides. Then we are going to spin up here to the top of the vehicle, where we are going to grab a hold of the front end and detach it away here from the back end. You are now going to grab a hold of the backpack and slide this here upwards, which will then allow you to take a hold of this guy's foot design. So you are going to grab a hold of these, and this is going to completely extend all the way downwards, resulting in a pretty lanky looking transformer. Once it's all said and done, we can then grab a hold of these shin guards, and these will very nicely snap back into their original configurations. Then what you're going to do is grab a hold of the feet, slide these here upwards, and buried beneath are indeed the front toes of this guy, so definitely make sure that you also deploy those. Once it's all said and done, we can now grab a hold of the waist joint and spin this here all the way around until the back is now facing the front. As I'm sure you guys would then guess, we are going to grab a hold of either side and directly split this here down the middle to almost give Agent Knight a full-blown Gerwalk mode. Next up, we are going to grab a hold of this guy's head sculpt and slide this here all the way upwards. We are then going to grab a hold of the front end of the vehicle, slide this here down, make sure the backpack is positioned backwards like this, as we are now going to spin around here to the back, where in total there are 2 additional hinge joints that you must make sure are completely compressed all the way down on both sides. Once that's all said and done, we can now spin back around here to the front, where this chest piece is very nicely going to lock into place. You are then going to grab a hold of the shoulders, spin these here around, and make sure that you do extend these here upwards, completely completing this guy's look. Again, make sure to do the same here for the opposite side, angle upwards. Then we are going to grab a hold of this guy's head sculpt, spin this here all the way around, and for one final touch, you are then going to spin around here to this windshield, which to be honest is packing some rather sus joints, but at least for now we are just going to take this and angle it here downwards exactly like this. Turbo boosting his way onto the battlefield, now we have Agent Knight fully transformed into his robot mode, and appearing to take a lot of inspiration from the classic Datsun design. This guy definitely does have incredibly heavy Transformers alternator vibes to him, so as we check out the details, the head sculpt is actually incredibly well designed. I do believe that this is original for this specific character. Initially, I was kind of hoping that much like the Dennis Nedry JP12, that this guy too would share a resemblance to that of David Hasselhoff, but considering that in the show, both Michael Knight and KITT were two very separate characters, I guess that really wouldn't have made much sense. One detail though that I definitely would have loved to have seen would have been that of a full-blown retractable visor, much like we did see from the Studio Series Hot Rod. But when it does come down here to the rest of the robot mode, this guy is stacked. Not only has he been incredibly well detailed, but pretty much filled in front side to back. The only part of the design that I honestly can't say I'm too crazy about would be the skirt and the thighs. Considering that these are primarily blue, I really do think they kind of contrast in comparison to the rest of the black and the grey, but as we spin this guy here around to the back, he is sporting an incredibly slim profile. To be honest, there is barely any kibble on this design at all. Now this windshield I think will most definitely become very quickly way more than meets the eye, because this right here is the official transformation, although for whatever reason this guy in addition to that is also sporting an extra mushroom joint, which you just do not need for this transformation, and then there is also an extra slot on the back that the windshield can very nicely slide into, which then results in an alternate backpack configuration, which to be fair, from certain angles doesn't look too bad, but personally guys, I think that in the future we are more than likely going to see these joints have a much bigger role to play, hopefully if Hasbro ever do decide to retool KITT into Car, who was KITT's iconic nemesis in the original Knight Rider TV show. Personally, I think that would be epic, especially when it comes down to their sweet vehicle modes. In terms of weaponry, I think it is safe to say that KITT is absolutely kitted out, because in addition to this larger blaster, it's Uzi time baby, as there is also a much smaller weapon included, which should then give Agent Knight no issues in absolutely tearing up that battlefield. Then saving easily the best for last, there is also a wrist-mounted comms link, which is a great throwback to the TV show. When it comes down to weapon storage, in addition to everything storing on the underside of KITT, both of the blasters can be attached onto the back of this guy's door wings. Turbo boosting our way into this guy's posability. First of all, those door wings are incredibly expressive, so in addition to being angled downwards, they can be brought upwards, they can then be brought backwards as well as forwards. The head is packing a supreme ball joint which allows him to look up all of the way. The shoulders can be brought forwards as well as can be brought backwards, although unfortunately these don't really lock into place, so do have a tendency to kind of dip downwards. I do in some ways wish that maybe they could have nicked the engineering as seen on the Studio Series Prowl, because personally I think that just would have made these here a little more stable. They can then kick out to the side as well as rotate around to the bicep. You can bend the elbows pretty much there to 90, the wrist can rotate as well as can also rock both backwards and forwards. The waist can spin all the way around, the hips can then kick outwards as well as can be brought both forwards and backwards. So when it does come down to this guy pulling a surprise maneuver on the battlefield, he should have no issues in doing so. The thigh can then spin all the way around, the knee will bend pretty much there to 90. In addition to the foot being able to rock downwards, it can of course also rock both side to side, so a pretty decently articulated figure, especially for a crossover. But as I'm sure you guys all know by now, to see the true capabilities of Agent Knight, now let's put him through the pose test. Firing through a few size comparisons, first of all we are bringing out the Studio Series 86 Optimus Prime. So Agent Knight is most definitely an anomaly when it comes down to scale. For this to work at all, I do believe this guy should be at the very least exactly the same size as the Studio Series Prowl, and yes, even when in robot mode, he is still slightly too big for the likes of the Masterpiece Transformers, but to be honest, I really do feel as if though this is ever so slightly off, so if you wanted to make it work, I think you could most definitely do so. Here is how he compares alongside one of the more recent crossovers where you have Party Wallop. Then next up, the Back to the Future Gigawatt. And considering that Hasbro appeared to be completely chucking scale right out of the window, I really wouldn't have mind in the slightest had this guy also been exactly the same size as Agent Knight. Can you guys imagine had they been able to integrate electronics into the DeLorean? Damn, this thing would have looked straight up fire. Then we have the Transformers Earthrise Deluxe Class Blue Streak, who is packing the iconic Datsun design, which I do think this guy here was most definitely inspired by. And then finally, we are bringing out easily the smallest out of the bunch, the Studio Series 86 Bumblebee. Now, turning to what is easily the most exciting gimmick of this crossover, that being of course the return of electronic lights and sounds, which I do believe is a first for a Generation style figure since the Titan class Titan's Return Fortress Maximus. So in order to power KITT up, you will simply smack this button on the top of the bonnet, and that right there I thought was sick, especially when it comes down to that light scanner.
Thank you, sir. I am the voice of Knight Industry 2000's microprocessor, K.I.T.T for easy reference. KITT if you prefer. Hold on, this could be a bit bumpy. So you're sure this is the right way? Very well.
That is so cool, and I really like how the voice clips aren't just one and done. There are definitely quite a few to cycle through which are directly inspired by the TV show, and the reason why I do say inspired is because at least to myself that doesn't quite sound like William Daniels, who was the original voice actor of KITT during the Knight Rider TV show, which I do think is a bit of a shame, especially considering that fairly recently we saw Playmobil acquire the rights to the actual voice recordings. But KITT has one final trick up his sleeve, and that would technically be a hidden mode. So to activate this, you will simply hold down on the button, bang, and almost instantly that light scanner will be activated. Now one thing which I thought was sick about this is that this does stay on for I think around 2 minutes, and you don't require any of the additional sound effects to accompany it. So when it does come down to a display, this thing is going to look wicked, and to be honest guys, I do think that right now we are looking at contender for maybe the best looking crossover vehicle mode that we've so far seen for Transformers. For some bonus comparisons, who you gonna call? Ghostbusters! Here we have Ectotron fully transformed into the iconic Ecto-1, and I really do think these two here are super comparable because when it does come down to size, they are both incredibly similar to each other. Another thing which I also think is super important to mention is just how well done the plastic quality is here for Agent Knight. To be honest, he is so well made to the point where I think he could almost perfectly fit in with the likes of some of the original 2010 live action movie Transformers. Which, speaking of, for a right-side blast from the past, we have the Human Alliance Bumblebee, which was a line that I do believe was originally inspired by Transformers alternators. Now correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe the design team have actually said that if this guy, Agent Knight, was to scale with any Transformer line, that it would be some of those original Transformers alternator releases. And to be honest guys, I can absolutely see what they mean, because not only when it comes down to the look of the robot mode, but even here for the vehicle mode, they really are incredibly comparable. Here is how they both compare once fully transformed into their robot modes. And in this form, perhaps Bumblebee is a little too big, but to kind of go back to my earlier point, if you still have any of those Transformers alternators kicking about, I do think you could definitely make it work. Then finally, we are bringing out Ectotron, who to my surprise is still very similar in size, stacked up against Agent Knight. So, wrapping up on this review for the Transformers Knight Rider Agent Knight crossover. To be honest guys, I think this is mostly an absolute banger, and to be fair, it is definitely a very desired mashup. They have taken Knight Rider, which was easily one of the most iconic shows from the 80s, and have combined that along with the power of Transformers. The details are near spot on to what we did see from the TV show, and the icing on the cake would have to be the return of electronic lights and sounds, which I think for a vehicle such as KITT is just simply epic. aesthetic. And the robot mode is definitely a very safe design for them to have gone with. It is inspired by the now classic Omnibot / Datsun look, but it most definitely gets the job done. Overall, this is an incredibly solid crossover, and I would love to know what you guys think down below. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and until my next review, transform and roll out!